I have some great HOA stories for you today, and you're going to love that title story too. Here's our first one. I seem to be dealing with a very dramatic, over-the-top, potentially hostile downstairs neighbor. I moved into a new apartment in October. I met the downstairs neighbor, male, 40s-ish, married, on my first night there when I was moving in. He actually helped my partner, who was bringing all of our stuff up from the moving truck. In my first conversation with him, I could tell he was the complainy type. He mentioned how unsafe the neighborhood is, how the landlord just cares about making money and was trying to increase their rent. He hadn't increased it since 2020 apparently, how there are sound issues in the building, construction next door, and blah blah blah. Now I live in a pretty hectic part of New York City. None of this is unexpected nor a hassle to me. It's just a part of life. Anyway, within our first month, maybe even a couple of weeks, he commented to my partner a few times about how we are too loud. On another occasion, my two dogs, one of which is a foster, got in a huge fight and I was screaming to get them off of each other and so on. It was the middle of the day, but I'm sure it was surprising for anyone in the apartment building. The next day, he asked my partner why there was so much noise from the day before. Within the first month, he called my partner twice over the phone in the middle of the night to inform him that we were making too much noise and that they were trying to sleep. Once, when my dog woke up in the middle of the night a few times and was jumping off and back onto the bed, and another time when my dog was eating a bone and making too much noise against the floor. This one I feel is warranted because it was like 1 a.m. I told him that we would stop and things seemed to be fine for like a week. I am the people-pleasing, very anxious type. I left a pretty bad living situation to move to this apartment, so I feel a lot of anxiety about being able to be myself and live my own life in my apartment. Even so, I started trying to walk quieter and tried my best to refrain from loud activities, although I really can't even pinpoint what is so loud to him in the first place. I bought a bunch of extra rugs to put down on the floor so steps wouldn't sound as loud. I set up cameras in my apartment to monitor my dog's noise and so on. I guess on several separate occasions he mentioned in passing to my partner that we were too noisy. My partner is not the people-pleasing type, and I told him nothing we were doing was too loud, and that, even so, it wasn't directed at him. We live in a building, we have to be able to live our lives and so on. Knowing my partner and knowing what I do of the neighbor, the exchange was probably not super pleasant on either side, but I wasn't there, so I cannot confirm. My partner informed me on several situations after that he would walk up the stairs and past his door, and the guy would hit his door from the inside as my partner was walking by. They have had a few heated exchanges since then, but I've never been involved. And then, about a month ago, I was working on training my dog, and she was barking and whining pretty consistently for a bit. I received a phone call from the landlord that he had received a noise complaint about my dog and asked how many dogs I have. I informed him that I have one at least and also have a foster, which the apartment broker informed me was absolutely fine. He said he loves pets and asked that I just keep them under control. I told him that I knew it was the guy downstairs and that I knew their general existence annoyed him, but that I was training her and I would cease that. She's a pretty quiet dog, other than when I'm trying to crate train her, so I knew that the complaints should have stopped. Later that evening, around 6 p.m., I was walking around hanging up Christmas decorations when I heard what sounded like a bang from the floor. My partner said that was the guy downstairs, that he's done that several times before, I just hadn't noticed. He then stepped a few times in response to the guy banging on the floor, which was his ceiling. The neighbor then comes out of his apartment and yells up the staircase. A small verbal back and forth ensues. I ask him if he has a problem with us walking about in our own apartment, and he calls me FB and tells me to shut up. I wait 3 minutes to call the landlord, by which time the guy downstairs has already called him. Shortly after, a girl from upstairs comes down and tells us that this is just how him and his wife are. They've been in the building the longest, they have issues with everything, including her dogs and so on. The landlord calls me back and advises that he already told the neighbor that he cannot control other people walking around at 5 p.m. and so on. This is just how he is, and he can't speculate, but something else is going on there. Sometimes he has good days and sometimes he has bad days, but he's harmless. I told him that he called me some profane words, but that I completely understood the complaints about the barking earlier that day, and just as I had told him earlier, I would stop the training. Fast forward 3 weeks. I've received a notice from the city that a barking dog noise complaint has been filed with the city. I don't know if this complaint was made because of the 1 day of barking that she was doing, or if it was made after. I believe, due to the timing of the letter, that it was made afterwards. Fortunately, I am 100% positive that if an inspector would be sent, which was noted as a possibility in the letter, they would not find it a reliable complaint because she literally barks like once for 5 seconds every few days and would definitely not bark consistently enough to meet the city requirements for a fine. I'm not concerned about this, but I am concerned about the lengths this man is going to. A complaint to the city feels like quite a step, and that also makes me wonder what he is telling the landlord. Now, the landlord does not live on site, so cannot confirm that the dog is not barking. He also still seems to be yelling through the floor, his ceiling, at us when we are doing normal, everyday things. My main question after all of that is what can or should I do to protect myself legally and also with my landlord? I just moved in 3 months ago, so I'm really not trying to look like the problem tenant, but I'm concerned that this neighbor's complaining about every single little thing. I also dog sit and foster dogs often, so I'm also concerned about this person's retaliation against me, hindering both of those activities. I can also confirm that the barking dogs that this man's referring to are not the dogs that I dog sit or foster. So I'm currently thinking of emailing the landlord with the following points, with a note that I'm simply doing this to protect myself. So since our last conversation, I purchased additional rugs for the floors to reduce noise to the downstairs neighbor. I received a noise complaint from the city for a barking dog, which I am not at all concerned about in and of itself, but that I'm more worried about the escalation of this person's complaints, that I've set up cameras in my apartment and can provide video and sound evidence of any dates and times to counter the complaints of my dog's barking. I dog sit and foster often and have been doing so for years, and I've never had any issues in any of my previous apartment buildings with downstairs or any other neighbors, so this feels a little over the top. I believe the noise that I make in my apartment is on par or even less than the neighbor above me and others in the apartment, although I don't know if I want to do this because I don't want this to be taken as a complaint about the people above me, who are very heavy-footed. And that if my downstairs neighbor feels differently, I'd be happy to be invited into his apartment to hear what it sounds like from his point of hearing. Do you agree with emailing the list of problems, taking video evidence, and recording the harassment? Seriously, get a paper trail, because that way you can prove that it's more than just a he said, she said, that this just awesome golden tenant that's been there forever is a bad one. What would you do? Oh, this HOA story is kind of controversial. HOA management company didn't send gas bills for 2 years, causing balances to balloon. Now they're trying to charge late fees. I own a condo and I have automatic withdrawals set up for my assessments each month. The management company sends out gas bills each month instead of each unit paying the gas company directly. I pay my assessments and gas bills on time every month. They're paid through an app called Town Square. Our HOA was ran poorly for years. So for background info, we had an old management company who failed to send gas bills to unit owners for 2 years. Last spring, a new management company was hired. In an attempt to recoup the gas payments that weren't sent out for 2 years, the new management company had sent all unit owners a charge for 2 years' worth of gas bills. As a result, I was charged $2,000. All unit owners were in the same predicament. I've not been able to pay the amount off in full, but I continue to make my monthly assessment payments and current gas bill payments. Fast forward to the last 2 months, and I have started to receive late fees for assessments and gas bills being late. I reached out to the board, and I was notified that payments are made first in, first out. So my oldest outstanding balance is being paid first until my account balance is caught up. This has left my most recent assessments and gas bills being marked as late because I was not aware they were using first in, first out accounting methods. The reason I wasn't getting late fees before is because there was an error on the accounting team and the board had passed on fixing that error. I requested if I could have the 2 late fees removed from my account since I am actively making payments and trying to pay down my balance, but I am unable to pay off the entire balance immediately because of the 2 years of gas bills that weren't sent out. Do you agree that they should get the rest of the neighbors to hold a meeting and replace the board? OP says that the previous management company was paying the gas bills but not collecting from the homeowners, that all the owners were aware that we weren't being sent gas bills, and the repeated complaints, but nothing was done until we got a new management company. For the last 8 months, I've not been receiving late fees from the new management company. This comment says that, so you're aware that they were sending gas bills, what'd you do with the money that should have been sent in? And OP says, I just don't have the entire balance available right now. I've been making active payments to reduce the balance, but the addition of late fees is making that more difficult. So who's in the wrong here? Is it OP? Is it the HOA? Is it a little bit of both? Who should pay and who should have the bill sent out? What would you do in this situation? I think it's kind of messy, maybe. As we get into the next story, I have to tell you something. Hey, also, I added more stories to the new 24/7 HOA Karen radio stream on the channel, perfect to binge or play for background noise while you sleep. Check out the link in the description or on the front page of the channel. It looks like this. HOA story time. I'm a woman in my early 20s. I live with my partner in his early 30s. We recently moved into a condo, which I was a bit hesitant about because it seemed to be a tight-knit community with mostly retired elderly people. We purchased the condo outright and promptly moved in after inspections. We had a very unremarkable first 6 months, as in nothing really happened. There is a fee, I think it's around $1,000 a month, towards amenities and community events within the building. I don't use the common spaces, and most amenities, despite paying this fee to the association, cost upwards of $20, and parking costs $110 a month. Since we are owners, there is a board of other owners that get to vote on things, make plans, and gather at odd times during the day, such as 2 p.m. on a Tuesday for a few hours to discuss. They frequently are responsible for petitioning changes. When I had moved in, I wasn't explained to how it worked, where to go, nor introduced to the other members of the board. Oftentimes, these meetings are impossible to go to unless your day is empty, and they are mandatory. We had decided that we didn't have much interest in the bureaucracy aspect of living in our home, and it didn't seem like that the other board members wanted us to partake. We often experience a lot of creepy behavior, like staring us down or pausing mid-group discussion to stare at us coming in or going out of the building. In the laundry or garbage room, our neighbors sometimes follow us and stare at us from the door or stand outside their unit. If we take the stairs, neighbors will come out of their unit to look at us through the glass window on the door. Or the property managers just stare us down when we enter into the lobby. Even if I smile and wave, they just stare, which is the common issue. A smile and a hello does nothing, and they stare at us, unblinking, and turn their heads to follow us until we're out of eyesight. Basically, we did not have a warm welcome at all, which is fine because we really just wanted to lead a non-disruptive life and be good, quiet neighbors. There is a big hierarchy in the building where owners look down on renters, and a lot of people presumed we were young renters that don't belong. Others seem to be condo-owning board members that mostly seem to dislike us inherently, and I don't really understand. Due to this, and not being interested in being treated like an unwelcome zoo animal, we don't go to the board meetings, not as if they ever welcomed us or invited us. Frequently, we get emails to vote on representatives, and we waive our votes. The issue extends past the other owners and into the actual admin and property managers. Questions are met with passive aggression, condescending attitudes, or I'm sent on a duck hunt to track down people that I don't know and already don't like me. All of this began before we even got settled in. Mostly, I believe it's because we're young. We own, we have an equal say, and we're not welcome due to this. There's a cliquey association, basically. I don't plan to live here much longer because I don't mind the creepy behavior, but it's like I'm almost being alienated and forced out, despite paying X amount of fees for things that I'm generally not interested in using because of this. Or it's inaccessible due to admin taking a very eye-roll attitude. I have been nothing but polite and quiet, and I do not stir the pot. Community events are more catered to the majority of board owners, like bingo night, elderly social mingles, specified as such, or barbecues that require an entrance fee. I don't partake because I don't want to pay to be stared down or whispered about. Anyways, my point is there a way to work with the association? This is my first HOA type place I've lived, and most places I do live have these issues. When I lived in mostly an unregulated building with no association, I still attracted negative attention, despite keeping my head down and being polite. This has more stakes, as I am being shoved out of something that I have to partake in, and it builds a narrative within a tight-knit community about me and my partner. I usually take the stance of shrugging my shoulders and allowing whatever narrative to take place because, at the end of the day, I'm here to live in my home. It's causing a lot of weirdness, bullying, tension, and most importantly, I can't get any information out of anyone, even for events and votes that I'm obligated to partake in. I am very close to saying, screw this, I'm out, don't care, matching their energy with an equivalent rather than trying to be kind and say hello. It freaks me out, and my home doesn't feel like a home, and I can't go anywhere without negative attention or being followed by condo-owning association members. If they had something to say, it'd be a different story, but they just stare so blankly at me and peek around walls, doors, go into a common area, and don't respond to any kind of words. It's somewhat like a horror movie at times. Does anyone have any similar experiences? Advice or suggestions would be much appreciated. This one's tough because they're not literally breaking the law, but they're really just alienating you and treating you terribly. What would you do? HOA lawyer story time. Client walks into the office and asks us for a contract review. He then hands over an HOA contract. Before slogging through a whole HOA contract, I asked him what he was hoping to accomplish. They want me to dig up my sunflowers. Your sunflowers? Yes, I planted a row of sunflowers outside my house, and they pranced by and said that sunflowers are not allowed per the contract that I signed. So, I want you to tell me if that is true or not. Sir, before anything else, I need to tell you that this will likely be an hourly fee bill. HOAs are notorious for dragging things out, so these could quickly become expensive sunflowers. I don't care. This is America and I should be able to plant sunflowers, dang it. Still thinking he wasn't that serious about sunflowers, I asked for a 3-hour retainer. He immediately pulled out a checkbook and paid for 4 hours. So I buckled down to review the alleged anti-sunflower clause. Just for reference, the sunflowers he wanted to plant were really big, like 5 feet, and all along the front of the house. It was a very substantial amount of sunflowers. The contract did indeed contain a clause, with a very thorough list on which plants were and were not allowed to be planted. The list had just about every plant I could think of in alphabetical order, so think like apple, banana, cauliflower, dill, and so on. Sunflowers included. Corn was not included, which becomes very important later. Quick legal point. If you write no dogs allowed, it's normally assumed that you're talking about all dogs generally. If you write no labs, golden retrievers, or poodles allowed, it's normally assumed that all other dogs are allowed. Sometimes a not great attorney will write a super long list to pad hours, read charge more, instead of just writing no plants without prior approval or something. So I called the client back in for the bad news. In explaining the above legal point, I let him know that the HOA got a raw deal from whoever drafted the contract. No can do on the sunflowers, but if it makes you feel any better, they were probably overbilled by whoever wrote this contract. Pretty shoddy work too, they even forgot to write down corn, but they included nonsense like dragon fruit. So yes to corn, no to sunflowers? I didn't really check the contract for corn, but it's not prohibited in the plant sections, so probably? Excellent, that'll work. I thought he was oddly happy with bad news. And then, 2 or 3 weeks later, he came in with a picture of his house, surrounded by huge sunflowers. What happened? The guy drove out to the country and bought obnoxiously large and ugly corn stalks. He promptly planted them where the sunflowers had been. When confronted by the HOA, he told them, paraphrasing, to suck it, the contract lets me plant corn. And then, after some negotiation, he agreed to take the corn down in exchange for permission to plant sunflowers. Now we are friends, he's still a great client, and he lives surrounded by a ridiculous moat of sunflowers. Being considered an unauthorized boarder by the HOA, posted by Motive Labrosse, with updates and drama in the comments. Well, over a decade ago, I was forced to move back in with my dad. I was only planning to stay a few months till I was financially stable enough to get my own place once again. But my dad insisted that I stay rent-free while I got my car paid off and some serious dental work done. This lasted 4 years. My dad owns a really nice place in a subdivision that had an HOA. For about 2 of those 4 years, things went fine, until a woman who I shall aptly call Karen became head of the HOA. Me and Karen had many unfortunate run-ins in the past. She would constantly ask my dad how long until I move out. Then she would always report me and my dad to the HOA for the silliest things, which the HOA would usually ignore or at best dismiss after getting our side of the story. But now that she was in control, she took direct action. The first was to declare me an unauthorized boarder after instituting a bylaw that all adults 21 and older in a household have to be registered with the HOA as a permanent resident with a minimum of 5 years that they have to stay without penalizing the homeowner. My dad refused to do any such thing because I would eventually be getting my own place. But Karen insisted, even serving him 2 years of backdated penalties for having me there. My dad ended up having to spend money on a lawyer to send her a cease and desist order because I was legally grandfathered in since I was there before the bylaw. Of course, the fines were begrudgingly dropped, but afterwards she would try to nickel and dime my dad with constant little things like me being out at all hours of the night, well, I worked late, or the way I dressed in public being inappropriate, jeans and a band t-shirts mostly, and other stupid crap that most of which weren't in the bylaws. She even took to using a selfie stick over the fence to see if there was anything in the backyard violating the rules. I since moved out of there, and a year or so later, Karen was voted out of the HOA after ticking off the wrong people. Update and drama. One commenter asked OP, "I'd like to know what person held the gun to your head and said that you must move back in with your dad. Chances are, it sounds like you messed up in life, and this was the easy and convenient thing for you to do. Yes, this HOA was bad, but do a bit of self-reflecting and come to terms with the fact that this wouldn't have even been a thing if it wasn't for your life decisions." And OP fires back with, "Nice to know you're freaking psychic. If you must know, there was some bad blood between me and my at-the-time roommate's psychopath, now ex-wife, and it got to the point that I didn't feel safe living in the same apartment with her. The lease had to be broken, and it drained me out of a ton of cash. My pop was good enough to give me a temporary roof over my head. Otherwise, I'd be homeless. I was only planning on spending a couple months at my pop's place till I was on my feet, but he insisted that I stay until my car was paid off and I got some much-needed dental work done." Crazy story, and be sure not to assume things about people's situation, right? You know what they say that makes you. My HOA will learn that I absolutely live by the letter of the law. My HOA recently changed the rules limiting the amount of vehicles allowed in my driveway. I collect cars, all of which run, drive, and are registered and insured, and my household also has 4 licensed drivers. When I moved in, the rules stated only 1 Class C vehicle allowed per driveway. Well, that was fine by me since Class C vehicles don't exist. Class C vehicles were not defined in the HOA rules either. I assume whoever wrote that rule assumed since they had a Class C license, standard cars and trucks must be Class C. So I moved in, and after stuffing 2 cars, 4 motorcycles, and my camper in the garage, I placed 5 vehicles in my driveway. The letters came. I was quickly able to deflate them after asking them for the legal definition of a Class C vehicle. No fines paid. Fast forward for about a year, and the HOA proposed a rule change, now stating 3 vehicles per driveway maximum, and since 3 is more than 1 and people lack critical thinking skills, it was passed with over 85% support. Fine, 3 vehicles it is. I did some digging and I found the streets in my HOA were turned over to the city, an effort to avoid having to foot the maintenance bill, I'm sure, and as such, the HOA had no authority to stop people from parking on a public street. So I moved 2 vehicles then to my very narrow street, 1 in front of my house and 1 directly across the street in front of my neighbor's house. Now, the only vehicles that could safely drive past my home were motorcycles and the one guy with a smart car. It was glorious. My street is a main artery into and out of the neighborhood. Lots of U-turns and backtracking for folks to get home or to work. They are the ones who did the rest of the work for me. Complaints and calls to the HOA president resulted in another rule change vote. Now, my driveway is open to any amount of legally registered vehicles. It fits 9. I need more cars. Do you agree with this? I'm kind of surprised that last part worked. You can certainly park on a public street, but not usually in such a way that you block said street. Yeah, how did OP pull this off? Let me know in the comments. HOA tows me off my property, but I'm not even in the HOA. Click the video on your screen so you see what happens to that nasty HOA, and I'll see you there.